So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Well, I guess I'll start off with number one. Appreciate everybody taking the time this evening to take time out of your evening and at least get a little bit of a pre-conversation going before City Day. It's been a few years since we have done this in person, almost literally 3 years to the day that we had City Day the last time in person. Obviously, we've been under a pandemic throughout that process, and we've done actually a couple of virtual City Days, which actually ended up turning out pretty well. But I have to say, based on the registrations that we've got, which I think we're pushing over 200, that's awesome. And it's, I think, a reflection on everybody wanting to get some face time with their state legislators. You've heard, for some of you, you probably heard me say this a few times. This is a pretty big transition for everybody dealing with a legislative body at this point in time. We have roughly 1/3 turnover between now and the 2021 session, effectively a third new legislators. That's not too abnormal, but it's significant. And when you combine that with the next metric here, is 2/3 of the legislative body has not been together in an in-person session. So they were effectively elected during the pandemic and have not basically sat across from each other or next to each other and have had that kind of one-on-one dynamic. So that's going to be an interesting piece. And then the other layer on this is we effectively have a brand new leadership group between a new governor, a new Senate president, and a new House Speaker, as well as their overall leadership group, which has changed a bit since the 2021 session. So a lot of new folks, a lot of changes in terms of leadership that's out there. For those of us on this call, part of my lobby team, or perhaps some of you, if you had a chance to go into the building, it looks a lot different. Obviously, the scaffolding, all the construction activity going around it is focused on the seismic upgrades. So just starting out with that, it'll be a fairly significant challenge for any interest group and stuff lobbying in the building this session, and really in 24 as well, because we won't have full access to the Capitol until 2025. So that's a little bit of a background. I think for this evening, the conversation really is what I want to focus on is logistics and kind of walk you through what to expect for the day. Happy to take any questions. I do have a couple of staff folks here that are part of the lobby team if you've got any specific questions, but I should be able to handle most everything without messing it up. And then Melissa is here too from our staff to make sure I'm actually explaining things correctly from the logistics side of things. So with that, the first thing I wanted to cover for folks was really just what the day is. Now, you've all received essentially what the agenda looks like. So basically from about 8:15 in the morning until 9 o'clock, we've got a continental breakfast for folks. I think we'll still be taking any registrations or walk-ups from members to get in. The general session is going to be starting promptly at 9. So I suspect that probably 10 to 15 minutes before that, we're going to be asking people to sit down because we're going to be under a bit of a tight schedule going forward. Basically, the lay of the land here is Mayor Hoy from Salem is going to open City Day up. It's his first opportunity to do this as mayor. They also obviously went through an election cycle, and it's going to be great to have Salem be able to open things up at the Salem Convention Center. We also, Patty Mulvihill, our executive director, will be part of that, as well as Mayor Callaway, who's the current LOC president for 2023, and also Mayor Linehan from North Plains, who's the current OMA president. So this is a joint event that both LOC and OMA are sponsoring and have sponsored for a number of years. A lot of focus really, I'll say, on partnerships going forward. So we have things that we're still kind of doing on some of the details, I'll say. But in general, we do have the entire leadership coming forward that morning. So Governor Kotek will be on shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning. And then she'll be followed by Senator Wagner, who's the Senate president. We have Republican House Leader Vicky Breeze Iverson, who will be in after Senator Wagner, followed by Senator Tim Knopp, who is the Senate Republican leader. And then we were unable to secure the Speaker, Dan Rayfield, because he had other commitments that jumped into his schedule. However, we got the Majority Leader from the House, and that's Representative Fahey, who will be part of that overall program and stuff in the morning, and be able to share the same kind of remarks that you would expect from the Speaker as well. I'll say one interesting point heading into session that we've seen certainly in the last 24, 48 hours. I mean, we're literally 2 days into the session. It started on the 17th, is that both caucuses, both, I'll just say leadership groups, all have housing and homelessness as a key priority, either one or two going forward in the session, which I think is actually good for us, because that really is certainly a key area that we're going to be focusing in as an organization going forward. And I'll get to a little bit more of that a little bit later. So after we get through with that legislative leadership group, we have a program built in the morning where it's really kind of talking about some of the nuts and bolts of what the legislative landscape looks like. We'll get into some of where the numbers are in terms of representation. Probably a little bit of repetition on what you're hearing this evening, but it's still going to be important, I think, for other folks to see that for context. We're going to go into a little bit on capital construction. That has become a fairly significant item for a lot of cities that are out there, largely prompted by some of the federal assistance money that has come through the state and has then been funneled out across Oregon. For context, back in the 21 session, a little over $500 million was moved out of the legislative process, or moved out of the legislature to specific projects statewide, water-related projects, hitting an awful lot of small communities. It literally represented almost 20 years of what we would normally expect to see from the state, from the different water-related grant funding programs that they had in place. So I think a lot of cities saw that and are kind of wondering, how do I position myself for those types of projects in the future? So we're going to run through that process in the morning as well, because I think that'll be helpful going forward. We're also going to get into a little bit more, again, of working with legislative staff and some of the paperless offices. That's what a lot of them have been going to. So I think it'll be helpful, again, when you're communicating with your legislators, some of the, at least, I don't want to say tricks of the trade, but essentially some of the standard practices that we have incorporated into our general communication and what will help you with your work that will need to be ongoing. I think the one thing that you'll certainly hear over and over and over from us will be this grassroots lobbying effort that we really have focused in on here for the last few years. It is not just a specific to a single session, right? It is a communication effort and a grassroots effort that is literally 365 days a year. You have to maintain essentially your foot on the gas pedal on those conversations, on that education. And part of the challenge this time around is we got a lot of new faces. And the good news, I will also say, is that there are several legislators that are now seated that have local government experience in this cycle too. We haven't had that kind of a scale of local government backgrounds coming into Salem as we have this election cycle. So they're coming from cities, they're coming from counties. Some are former mayors, city council members, county commissioners, but also served on planning commissions or had been in law enforcement or something else related to that local government. So we're going to make sure that we spring off of some of that expertise that's coming in that we haven't had before, and try to maintain some of that education going forward. So the final piece really of that morning session is going to be on legislative priorities. And, we have 8 key priorities that came out of the balloting process that we had in 22. What we have decided to do, because it's really difficult to try to explain 8 key priorities to a legislator in 8 minutes or in 10 minutes or something of that nature, we have really narrowed it down. It doesn't mean that we've lost sight on all of them, but what we want you to focus on for for City Day is really 3 areas. One is in infrastructure funding to support resilient communities and needed housing. So that's a combination of the idea of more state assistance to try to put in more infrastructure projects at the local level. And that could be water related, but in this one, it kind of combines in with needed housing. So the idea here is if there's any way to identify some funds or some policies that can assist a city with getting more affordable housing built or more needed housing built, because we're looking at the full spectrum here. It's not just something that's specific to one group of folks within that affordable housing spectrum. It's really kind of the full range that's out there. That's something we're going to be certainly focusing on, as well as, again, your core infrastructure funding. Because even when you look at the water money that went out the door in the 21 session, a lot of those projects are facing inflationary increases, and we don't want to lose any of those projects. So we're going to see what we can do to try to identify some gap funding or some way to make sure that all of those projects that had some targeted funding that came out in 21 are going to get built over the next 5 years. Last thing we want to do is lose out on some of that investment that the state's already put out there. So that's really one of those core pieces. The other is the work that LOC and OMA have been doing since May of 22. That's essentially a statewide homeless response. The basic concept here is to identify direct funding to every city in the state. It doesn't make any difference. North, south, east, west, large, small, we have a homeless problem that extends well beyond those urban centers. And we are doing everything possible to advocate for that core funding request going forward. It's been a great partnership with OMA in this process. The leadership team that they have, combined with the work that LOC has been doing, and our staff has been great going forward. I think the key message here, and we'll get into this certainly for City Day itself to reinforce it, but have patience. There's certainly mixed messages out there coming from the governor's office in terms of where the focused funding is going to be and where it's not. So we have a session that's going to take us into June. The funding question for homelessness is not going to be solved in the first week of session or the second week or even probably the second month. So just have some patience going forward in terms of messaging that, making sure that you reinforce why your community should be able to participate in some of that additional funding. It all becomes a question of scale. I think for some of the smallest communities that are out there that face a homeless issue, $50,000 or $100,000 would go an awful long way. Obviously, if you're dealing with some of the larger urban centers, that $50,000 or $100,000 becomes more like 5 million just because of the scale. So that's something to certainly keep in mind as well. The final piece, and I'll get to really kind of a fourth one that is really kind of specific for a subset of our cities, but we have an economic development component here, which is really supporting the enterprise zone sunset extensions. I think we've proven throughout the years, many communities have that the enterprise zone program that's out there, both the rural one as well as the other one that applies to other areas, is incredibly helpful for reinvestment in communities, as well as having some kind of a incentive at that local level to attract new business development. So those are sunsets that are coming up here in the next couple of years, and we need to definitely reinforce that value of that economic development across your communities. And again, City Day, we'll get into more details And the booklet that you had just been emailed out basically gives you one pagers that get into more details on that. I think the best thing I can offer when you are communicating with your state elected officials here is personalize it. Try to bring it back down to the local level, whether you're in Independence, whether you're in Talent, whether you're in Veneta. You've got your own personal stories that I think fit for all three of these priorities and stuff that we're going to be bringing forward. And that's honestly going to have the most impact out there in terms of your work with those legislators and being able to educate them on the value. The other part of this thing is your job is not done after one touch point. I kind of mentioned earlier on, this grassroots effort is 365 days a year. So the 25th comes up in a week. You'll get a chance, hopefully, to get 15 minutes of fame with a legislator or perhaps their staff. Take advantage of the time, reinforce it after the meeting, and continue to have some touch points. And make sure you stay on top of what we're doing, because we do our best to try to communicate weekly, both in the bulletin and then starting February 3rd, we're going to start doing statewide calls on Fridays and be able to at least give you a sense on what's hot in the next week or what's coming up or where we need help from. So that's kind of the focus of where that morning program is directed at this point in time. Let me stop right there and see if there's any questions that folks have before I move on to a little bit more on the rest of the day. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, okay. It's interested in, I already know my representative and my senator have a relationship, kind of superficial relationship, but they know me. I want to talk to people who I don't know. I want to talk to, so is there a list of, have they made the committee assignments yet? So we can look on the legislative website, look at the committee assignments and see it, people on various committees, because I want to focus on talking to people on the high end of, and then maybe have somebody who is their constituent and I can kind of like tag along and join them on that. So is there some kind of a list of where I can kind of focus on people that I really want to talk to about those issues?
Well, so each of the committees, obviously are focused on a particular issue. So, there's transportation, there's housing, there's elements related to public safety and things of that nature. So, it ultimately comes down to what the issue is and where it sits within each respective chamber's committee. So that's ultimately what it comes down to, Peter. The good news is that the legislative website is all updated. All the committees have physical assignments, and you actually have the ability now within that legislative site to search and find bills and things of that nature. I was going to get into that a little bit later before we close up shop tonight, to just kind of give folks a sense who haven't been on the state's legislative site beforehand. So that's ultimately where it's at. Hopefully that answers the question.
Well, I just want to say it would be okay if I kind of tagged along with somebody so I could see a state representative from, say, I'm over in Baker County.
Yep.
I want to talk to a Democrats over in the Willamette Valley. I can see a representative from there and go. It's not going to be any problem for me to tag along with somebody else where they talk to their senator or Congress or senator representative. That'd be okay.
So I don't have a problem with that. So my recommendation would be maybe when you're there at City Day, take some time in the morning when you're meeting with some of your colleagues to see what they've got set up and if they wouldn't mind having some additional support for it. We're not tracking any kind of a sheet on who's meeting with who. What we do want for sure is feedback. So after you've met with a certain representative, if there's something that you can share, certainly send it my way and we'll feed it back into the lobby team. But beyond that, it's probably best that you try to coordinate that independently of us, because we're just not tracking what city is meeting with what legislator and things of that nature.
Okay, that's what I was planning. Thank you.
Okay.
Jim, I just wanted to make one point additionally to that, is that most of you will probably only have 15-minute meetings. So it's not really a lot of time to have too long of discussions. It's definitely okay to tag along with folks, but make sure you coordinate about what you want to talk about to make sure you can have that conversation in 15 minutes.
So there's two questions in the chat. Hillary, thank you for that. I did not give anybody what the fourth priority was. So that's not physically in the booklet, but it is focused really on transient lodging tax flexibility. It's something that a lot of the coastal communities are interested in and want to see, and it is certainly a priority of ours going in. So we have a one-pager available, and we'll have one of those available at City Day to be able to hand out. So you'll have that information as well. The other question in here from Trina Henderson is, how do I sign up for Friday calls? So we will get this out in the bulletin, not this week, but next week. It will effectively be a standard time of noon to 1 o'clock is typically going to be our time frame. And we will have the registration at that point in time, so you can essentially sign up for the whole series of meetings that take place during the session. It'll be in the same place effectively each week, same Zoom call, same Zoom connectivity and things of that nature. Looks like I got another quick question here from Jean and Miles. Go ahead.
Sorry, Jim.
No worries.
It's good to see you.
Yes.
I am having a hard time. My state senator is Art Robinson. I live in Cave Junction. I have tried. I've talked to his chief of staff once today, but I haven't been able to schedule an appointment. He says that Art Robinson will be there. I know he's had horrible health. He didn't attend at all last session. And I've never yet seen him come into the city of CJ for anything. So if I could get LOC's help in scheduling that appointment, I have called his chief of staff, whom I'm in another committee with, about a half a dozen times. I did talk to him briefly this afternoon, but not long enough to make an appointment. So yeah. He did say that Art would be there next week. I have no way of knowing, of course.
Right. So we can't read the crystal ball either. So I'm happy to try to help out with this. One recommendation, and I would have this for anybody. The first couple of weeks of session can be pretty chaotic. Right. And they've got committee assignments, they've got all sorts of things going on. So if they don't have a window for you to meet with a legislator, the next best thing is really with their staff. They do rely on an awful lot of staff to brief them and to bring them up to speed on issues. So if you can't get a physical legislator to meet with you because of one reason or another, take the opportunity to meet with that staff person. That's just as helpful, and then try to follow up with some kind of a virtual call or something of that nature once you get back into your home space.
Good idea. Thank you so much. That's exactly what I tried to do, and I can't get his chief of staff to return my calls. So yeah, it's frustrating, but I'll keep at it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Persistence can pay off on occasion. We believe it or not, we sometimes have the same problem with folks that have the appearance of ghosting us or not returning phone calls, text messages, emails, you name it. So it's just, unfortunately, they probably have a lot of other people coming at them too, and they're just trying to take things down sequentially. So let me get back to a little bit on the rest of the day. So essentially, once we get through with our legislative priorities, we're going to have box lunches available right around 11:45. And then really that afternoon is dedicated to getting meetings with your legislators. Hopefully, again, some of you have already been trying that. Keep it up. If you don't have anything secured, again, email and phone numbers is really your best option at this point in time. Like I said earlier, if you can't get something with the legislator themselves, take something with their staff. You never know when the legislator might be able to just pop in and you at least get a short amount of time or some FaceTime with them. Keep in mind what Nolan had said. They're probably going to allocate 15 minutes to you, There's no guarantee that you're going to get 15 minutes because other things happen. That's part of, I'll just say, kind of the managed chaos that takes place in any given day. I'll say for lobbyists, we have opportunities to sit down and maybe have more access because they're right across the street. So I'll have to say that I rarely get 15 minutes with any legislator. Usually it's something that's closer to 5 minutes. So it's like I need an elevator speech, something that I can offer in 30 seconds, 45 seconds type of thing. And then if you've got the opportunity to put more detail into that, certainly take that opportunity. But again, just for perspective wise and some expectation, even though you're going to get probably a 15-minute allocation within their calendar, there's other things going on in the day that may trim some of that off as well. So afternoon focus is legislators, but we've also built a program in. We've got 3 different workshops from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They are all going to be at the convention center. We're going to get into kind of a lobbying 201. It's a little bit more detail on capital construction requests. 1:30 in the afternoon, we've got economic development incentives, and we actually have Mark Garst. For those of you who don't know, Mark is leaving LOC. His last day is tomorrow. That's a pretty big hit for us. Mark has been our lead on all things taxation, revenue, property tax, et cetera, et cetera. I'll say the good news for us is we now have a partner at Business Oregon, because that's where Mark is going. So Mark is still going to walk you through some of the economic development incentives out there. And we'll have a couple of staff there as well. So that'll also be that afternoon, again, 1:30. The third and final workshop that we've got is at 2 o'clock that day. We have been doing a roadshow around the state. The focus has been essentially regulating public spaces related to persons experiencing homelessness. This is something that Patty Mulvihill, as well as the legal team, have been part of throughout the last several weeks, if not months, having some regional meetings and things of that nature. Well, we're going to take that roadshow and have that in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. And that's probably going to get over right about 3 o'clock. It may push a little bit further than that. The other thing that we have built in the afternoon for you is from 3 to 4:30. We've got agency tables. So far, we've got commitments from 5 state agencies. They'll have staff available there to answer questions. This is something that we did not do at the annual meeting, but we had some interest from members. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. We have Department of Land Conservation and Development. We have Oregon Department of Emergency Management there. Business Oregon will be there. Oregon Department of Energy will be there, and Oregon Parks and Rec. There's probably a slight chance we'll be able to add another 1 or 2, but those really are going to be the 5 agencies that are committed. They'll be there for 90 minutes. And then at 4:30 in the afternoon, we've got our legislative reception. So all of this activity is physically at the Salem Convention Center. We'll have a bus or buses, right, Melissa? 2 buses that
Yes.
will be cycling between the Capitol and the Salem Convention Center every 15 to 20 minutes. One of the things that we're suggesting is that you build some time in. So be prepared. If you've got a meeting at 1 o'clock, you probably want to get on the bus certainly by 12:30, if at all possible, and give yourself a little bit of time to check in. What we have this year, because of the challenges that we face with the reconstruction or the seismic work, is we also have increased safety protocols. So we have a metal detector at the entrance point for the public, and there is only one entrance point for the public. It is on the Willamette side, and again, it's easy enough to find. So think basically, I'll just say TSA light. So anything that's metal, it's going to get detected. You're not going to have to pull shoes off or anything of that nature going through, but just be prepared for a little bit of a backup, 10, maybe 15 minutes going into the Capitol. Let me answer a couple of questions real quick. So Kathy, Fallon, you got your hand up?
I do. All right, thank you so much. My question is, we have, one of our appointments is at 4:30.
Mhm.
And I noticed on the rules here, the last bus departs the Capitol at 4:30. That's what time our appointment is, so do we Uber it back or?
So you're probably about a 10-minute-ish, maybe 15-minute walk back to the Sandlin Convention Center. But Melissa, let me ask, are we gonna push those buses any further to maybe do a 4:45 or 5 o'clock?
We only have them reserved until 5 o'clock. We could ask them to try to come back around, but there's kind of a buffer in there for, traffic and things like that. So I would maybe say the backup plan could either be walking or Uber.
Probably would be weather dependent, right?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I can't guarantee to hold the bus because they have other reservations in the evening, so.
Great, thank you.
David, you got your hand up too. David McCall.
Yeah, my question was gonna be basically the same thing on the flip side. What do you suggest for those of us who have appointments at noon? So I guess walk or bus, or walk or Uber.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we know this isn't, a perfectly set up process, and there's only so much that we can try to fit into the day, both with morning program, afternoon, and then basically securing buses. So,
Okay, but knowing about the metal detectors and stuff helps, so thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. I had a couple of questions in the chat. Hang on a second. One was asking about the legislative reception. So it's pretty simple. We have a hosted food and beverage set up in there. It's really just meant to be a low-key, effectively chill opportunity, not just to do some networking with your own colleagues, but the idea certainly during the day when you're visiting with your elected official is to invite them personally to come to the reception, invite their staff. So it gives you that kind of opportunity to just do some networking. There is no real programmed structure to that reception. So again, it starts at 4:30, ends at roughly 7 o'clock or so. Does the Capitol have handicap parking? Good question. I'll say access to the Capitol again is only on the Willamette side. There is some limited handicap parking. I don't know how many spaces are physically dedicated to that, in all honesty. Any handicap parking, my recommendation would be to do it on the Willamette side, because there are limitations with the sidewalks that are on the Capitol in terms of closure or equipment being used on the building and things of that nature. So I mentioned earlier, there's really only one public access point, and it is literally a crosswalk coming across from Willamette. And that's all ADA structure, as well as access into the building. They also have a ramp for wheelchair access. Kathy, another question?
Hi, thank you. We have a member who has a service dog. Is there any tip or anything that we should know?
I know of no restrictions for anybody who's got a service dog. Nolan, are you? I mean, I haven't seen any kind of
No, it's a public accommodation. They
Yeah.
don't. You can't limit if it's a certified service animal, then you would have access.
Yeah, most staff know not to touch service dogs, but I doubt that's universal.
Hope that helps. One other quick question that came in, and that was bags, or no bags. So they have two different lines set up at the metal detector. If you have a bag, it gets to go on its own through a just like in an airport. If you don't have a bag, you're going to go through a different line, and it'll be a little bit faster. Let's see. Oh, real briefly on the bus. Again, we're limited in terms of construction, what we can do. Cycle will be at the convention center. And then the drop-off location will be on Winter Street, which is basically perpendicular to State, which goes in front of the Capitol, but it'll be fairly obvious. We can't physically park a bus in front of the Capitol because of the construction activity and other safety concerns. So you'll have a little bit of a walk to go around that. The other thing I wanted to let folks know is local government center. You can get access to that as well for if you have a longer time frame between meetings. So my recommendation, because of building capacity issues, what we have been telling the Capitol folks is that there is no loitering during the day. It's not a tourist visit. You're in for your meeting and you're out. If you have back-to-back meetings that are maybe 30 minutes or less between one senator and another legislator, I think you're fine to stay in the building. My recommendation, however, is that there's really no space in the hallways where the hearing rooms are at. You're better off going up to a reception point at the elevators on the second, third, or fourth floor of either the Senate or the House wing. There are chairs to sit, there's a couple benches and things of that nature, and that's probably not a bad place to queue up for your actual meetings to begin with. As a secondary queue, if you've got, we'll say, between 30 minutes and an hour for your next meeting, just come on over to local government center. We've got rooms available there. We also are going to have some ability to stream the afternoon program over there, but just be advised that we've only got so much room at the local government center. We can't handle 200 people over there, which is why we have focused our program over at the Salem Convention Center, which has got the space and has got the structure over there. And there will also be refreshments available there in the afternoon, as well as snacks. So this has been kind of an interesting structure to how we put the day together. Again, what we're focused in on is a combination of both the AM program, getting you out the door to meet with your legislators, and then providing a reception there in the afternoon to, again, talk with your colleagues, hopefully get another opportunity to meet with your legislator or their staff if they come over in a more a chill environment. And then also have that program in the afternoon for some added value for you. Feel free to keep asking questions. Let's see. Yeah, John, you're right. John McCardle dropped a note into the chat about, you definitely could have longer conversations with your legislator at the reception. So again, it's something that we have got space for and are looking forward again to trying to get a few more legislators than what we had last time around, as well as members. I mean, that'll be important too. I mean, as much as I'd like to talk to legislators, I'd love to have a better balance between members who are there participating and certainly the legislative body. Peter, go ahead. Get your hand up.
Jim, as long as we got a chance for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that TLT would come up as a priority and increased flexibility in the use of transient lodging tax. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means to you?
Yeah, so right now, the way the formula is structured and what you can and cannot spend it on is what we have heard from many of our cities, especially those that are tourist dependent, is pretty much everybody knows where the coast is. They know where Seaside is, they know where Newport is. They don't need to have any more marketing money put into telling people where the beach is. They'd like to use a higher percentage of that revenue that's coming in for things that allow them to continue to provide that tourist experience, right? It could be anything from public safety improvements. It could be infrastructure to deal with that. It could be something also related to, I'll say, more affordable housing choices for folks. So that's what we're talking about. I
would give you a little bit of a wrinkle on that, in that
Yeah.
Albany is certainly a city that sees a lot of transient travel, but not a lot of tourism. So we're kind of in the same boat, but for a different reason.
Yeah. That's helpful. And, you know, for you folks in Albany, being able to share that type of perspective on it, that's helpful. Because I think if we're going to have any success at modifying it, this is going to be one of those pieces that we're going to have to rally around it, because the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association isn't particularly our friends at this point in time. They want to hang on to every single dime that's generated and push it out the door with marketing.
Right.
But definitely, even when you talk with legislators, especially in those coastal areas, and honestly, some of the strips in Southern Oregon or Central Oregon and stuff that have a high tourist component to their economy, I don't think they believe that they need to do any more marketing either. They got plenty. They got thousands of people coming in every weekend.
Right.
So,
may I, if nobody else has their hand up, may I?
yeah, keep going. You're good.
Another one. You know, you talked about homelessness as a priority, and I've often said that homelessness is not a problem. It's a symptom of many different problems. And if you try to treat each one of them with the same brush in the same way, you're going to fail. So what about Measure 110 and Senate Bill 48 that have the effects, the incredibly negative effects that they have had? Affordable housing certainly is another one. Mental health is certainly another one.
Right.
And all of those are very different from each other. Some of them are related, you know, drug addiction and drug abuse are related to mental health, but they're very different from affordable or housing affordability. So,
yeah, no, it's a layered impact, right? Lots of different variables out there having an impact on it, and I think you're right. You have to try to figure out how to treat all of them, because doing one doesn't get you the end result that you want. Measure 110. Shortcomings, that is certainly a priority for us going into the session. Scott, I don't know if you wanted to make any other comments on that.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I think the decision to narrow the ask for City Day was to, because when we've been able to actually pinpoint where City Day has improved our legislative fortunes, it's when we've had a disciplined, narrowed ask. The Measure 110 conversation is a difficult one. There is a work group that's taking place. We are participating in that, and we are working on some concepts in coalition with our partners on this. These are areas where the league and the city is not the only service provider, is not the only entity that's at play. And the coalition hasn't firmed up on what the actual ask is. So in order to get change, our group, the sheriffs, the chiefs, the counties, the behavioral health folks, all of those providers do need to be in lockstep, and they need to have some discipline. That's why this isn't included in the ask. What I think the issue is on homelessness housing, where we do have an inventory issue, where you do have a rent a cost problem related to rents. Being able to address that is something that's achievable on the 25th. That's something where they're going to make those decisions very, very early in the session. Budget priorities are going to be outlined probably at some point in February, and this is where we think the impact will be.
Good. So we've got roughly 14 minutes left. I'm going to share a screen here in just a minute, and this will maybe help place a little bit in terms of logistics. So hang on a moment, and I am going to do a share. Everybody see that? Can you see a schematic? Nolan, can you guys see this?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thank you.
I can see it.
Okay, fabulous. All right, so basically what you've got is the public entrance that is here at the base is on State Street. Willamette University is over here. And then the street that the bus is going to be parking on is Winter. It's not actually on this, but it's really close by. It's right in here. So the bus is going to come around the corner. You're just going to walk up the sidewalk on the Willamette side and just come straight across. And this is where all of the metal detection equipment is on the inside. Everything that's in gray is closed, and it effectively on each floor, that's really the way it looks. So you have access through what's referred to as a galleria. It's essentially a hallway between the two wings. So you have the Senate side, and then you have the House side. And it's just a matter of hopping onto the elevators, and then each floor effectively has the same type of closure structure. And let's see if I can bring this up if this, yeah, that makes any sense. Let's see a little bit like that. Flip this around. All right, there we go. So each floor, effectively, everything in the center is closed. There's no way to pass between the Senate or the House wing on any floor. You'll have to go right back down, come across the galleria or the hallway, and go back up on the wing of either chamber to get access. So just so you understand kind of the limitations that we've got to deal with. But as I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for a place to kind of hang out for a little bit, there's an area outside the elevators on both Senate and House wings that gives you at least a little bit of space to hold for, like I said, 15, maybe 30 minutes at the max and stuff before you think about having to come over to local government center or head back to the convention center and stuff for longer in betweens. And again, this is something that we're trying to do to mitigate building capacity issues. This week it's been pretty light. It's going to start kicking up quite a bit more in terms of that issue going forward, but that's really going to be an important thing that we're going to definitely stress on that day, because the last thing we want to do is trigger a building shutdown. They have a capacity right now, say of around 500. It might be a little bit higher than that, but in general, they have to deal with fire code, and we don't want to shut it down for everybody else that's using the building, not just other lobbyists, but other interests and stuff that are there. So do your best, schedule the meetings in and out. We've got a great program in the afternoon. If you need some refueling before me or after meetings, certainly come over to local government center or into the convention center as well. Final piece I was going to show is I'm going to bring another screen in here for you. So one thing that's pretty awesome that the state has really worked on the last few years is their legislative website. It is very easy to use. Structure of it is you have basically the daily meetings that are taking place. So if you were to go down, and I'll just click, there's a current committee that's working right now. It's a joint committee on semiconductors. You bring up the menu or the screen, and you got all of the members who are part of the committee. You have the staff that are assigned to that committee. You have the meeting times and where they're located. So if you went physically to the meeting itself, you can see what the agenda is written out here. And then if you actually wanted to go in and watch the meeting, it's a matter of just clicking this for live content. It's just a small little camera. They have also made it really easy to submit comments as well. They have a structure here where you can basically submit comment both verbally, but also something physically online. It's a matter of just signing up for the program, and then you're sent a link and you can get access to the committee and be part of the testimony that's going on. This is probably one of the best things that has come out of this virtual environment is providing communities from around the state the opportunity to join in on meetings virtually instead of driving 5.5 or 6 hours and finding out that the committee has been either canceled or there's so many people testifying that they're going to stop the meeting after 3 hours and you are not going to be able to get your testimony in. The other thing you can do, go back to the opening here. So if you don't know who your senator is or your House member, it's pretty simple. It's a matter of clicking either the Senate or the House. If you go here, you go down to find a representative. It's going to send you away to a geo mapping site. So just take a moment. And then it's literally add in what city you're in. So I'm just going to put Albany in. And bingo. So here's Albany, and this gives you both your Senate district as well as your House district member. And then it also gives you your congressional district as well. So it's pretty cool with the links that they have fed into this process. Very easy to use. Another piece on this is going into bills. So you can do a bill search by number or by bill text. And it's a matter of putting a keyword in there. So if you went, I'll just put in transportation. And if I could spell, go. So pops up all the bills that have some reference point in transportation. Pretty slick process if you were to click on any one of them. Again, the actual bill page is brought up. It tells you what committee it's sitting in. It'll give you a measure history if there is anyone, as well as scheduled events. And again, structure here, it gives you, it won't do it because it's not actually scheduled for a hearing, but you have the ability with this menu to offer testimony, register to testimony, submit testimony, take a look if any amendments are under, as well as any kind of analysis that's been done. It all gets fed into the system. It's actually pretty slick process. And then you can also do a search by bill number. And I'll just put one in here that's mine. This session. Same kind of thing. It's a House bill. It's specifically on traffic safety. Same menu structure up here as well. You also have the ability to subscribe to the committee itself in that process, and it's a matter of just entering your email address, submit, and you'll get every single update coming forward when the committee meets, what the agenda is, et cetera, et cetera. And the other cool thing is you can actually go back in time. You go back to whatever session, let's see, the furthest just goes back is to 07. So quite a bit of background in here that you can run searches on, same kind of structure as far as trying to go back in time with that. So one of the things that we'll be doing as your lobby team is each week with these weekly phone calls, we'll give you a sense on what we're tracking, but we're also going to have some kind of a tracking sheet set up for you as well. So you'll know by portfolio what we're focused in on. And we're using a new tracking system internally and are still going to need to learn a little bit to try to figure out how to provide a little bit more access and stuff if that's something that you want to have. But things are set up actually really nicely now within the Oregon legislative website, and being able to get access to bills, being able to get access to committees, and honestly being able to track a bill. So you have that ability as well within the system. So we got about 3 minutes left. Again, this was just an idea to give you an expectation on what it was going to be like next week. Hopefully we answered everything. If you've got additional questions, certainly pass them on and we'll do our best to help out. I will see what I can do to honestly run by Senator or Art's office and stuff tomorrow and see if there's a way to help you out, Gene. So I'll at least follow up on that. Any other questions before we sign off?
Thank you, Jim.
Yep. Let's see. Did I miss anything from my team?
I think you're good.
Okay. All right, fabulous. Well, we're going to sign off again. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Looking forward to seeing everybody next week on City Day. Again, keep in mind, Capitol, no loitering. It's not a tourist event. You're in for meetings and you're out. We got a great program in the afternoon, and then do your best to stick around for that reception in the evening to at least network with each other as well as your legislators. Appreciate it. Thank you.